melee weapon from the very worst until the very best. And so far we've had 21 different melee weapons in Fortnite, and we gotta start with number 21, the pickaxe. This is technically a melee weapon. We use it to farm, we use it to break down builds. It is the true OG, and back in the day it used to do 10 damage per swing, and then they buffed it in season 6 chapter 1 to do 20 damage per swing. This is more of a harvesting tool, not really meant to use it against players, but people still pickaxe each other, whether they don't have a gun or they just want to embarrass the other player. Special shout out to the Star Wand pickaxe, because at one point it was broken and it could do over 50 damage and like 86 headshot damage somehow. But this list is about how effective the weapon actually is at killing other players or for mobility, and the OG pickaxe doesn't accomplish any of that. At number 20, we have the sideways scythe. This one was also bad, and so were all the sideways weapons. They were just like not that great compared to normal Fortnite weapons. They felt clunky, so did the scythe. At one point, you would take fall damage if you use this as well. Like if you use the slam attack, you would take fall damage. I don't know if they ended up fixing that. The first couple of hits would only do 35 damage. You had to do like a whole combo just to crack someone's shield. It wasn't useful against any player who knew how to build, because it didn't even do that much structure damage either. So you couldn't just use it to jump into people's boxes. It was extremely slow. You were locked into the animation while swinging, meaning you can't just swap to your pump after you start swinging with this. You were kind of stuck in that animation. Nobody liked it, and barely anybody used it. At number 19, we have the Howler Claws. This was also another kind of useless melee weapon. They added it in Fortnite Chapter 3. The claws only did 35 damage, and the attacks were also very slow. But the thing that this one had that the scythe didn't have is it had like some sort of ability where you can scan players around you, and it took about 20 seconds to use it again. So you could potentially scan and find players that are camping near you, but the range on the scan wasn't that big, and I don't really remember ever using this effectively. At number 18, we have Wolverine Claws. Wolverine was an absolute menace of a boss in chapter 2, but his claws just didn't carry over the same, aura. It did 35 damage, so the same as the Howler Claws. The only thing extra it had was it had a dash attack, which was actually useful to kind of take high ground or rotate, and that was the main use case for this weapon. You weren't really using this to attack other players. You were just using it for the dash. You also did move slightly faster, and you gained 2 health per second while you had this equipped, so you could use it to get back your HP. Using this actually to kill players wasn't that good. At number 17, we have She-Hulk's Fists. These weren't terrible. It was a chapter 2 season 4 melee weapon. It did more damage than the Wolverine Claws, doing 45 damage per swing, with the final hit hitting over 100. There was also a super jump ability you could use for rotation with this Mythic. Just like the Wolverine Claws, you also got a speed boost and 2 health regen. The only downside was attacking with it was very slow, and you would also be stuck in the animation once you started punching, so it was easy to get one pumped. But because of its movement and extra regen, it's going to rank higher than the other melee weapons. At number 16, we have the Kingsman Umbrella. This one only lasted in the game for a few weeks. It was a melee weapon, so this one got a lot of hate for being useless, but I don't think it was that bad compared to the other ones we've already covered. It was actually useful in a few different scenarios. So the damage itself was okay. You did 50 damage per swing and worked up to a 100 damage wombo combo at the end, but you could actually hold out the umbrella and block incoming bullets. So you could kind of use it to dodge and block attacks. While you were holding out the umbrella, you could also charge it to do a dash ability that would do 75 damage. It was kind of like a glider as well. You could only glide for 2 seconds, but as long as you're not too high up, you could use it to not take any fall damage. You could also farm mats with this thing and farm a lot faster than the pickaxe. So like I said, this thing got a lot of hate for being useless, but in my opinion, there was a lot of scenarios where you could actually use this thing effectively. Next up, we have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Mythics. All of these weapons were pretty much the same besides how they looked, but they were actually kind of useful for mobility, and that was the main use case for them. They didn't do a ton of damage, only 15 damage per attack, but the attacks were very, very fast. But the thing about this is you had 3 dash charges that you could use, and they would refresh. So this was fantastic for rotations. They were a must pick up if you didn't have any mobility, like the grappler or shockwaves. So all in all, not that great for offensive, but really, really good for mobility, which is why they are ranked 15 on this list. The Ninja Turtle Mythics are also in creative now, so there's maps that can be made with them, but so are the new exotics from the new season, and I actually added them to my map Rocket Wars, and there's currently a giveaway going on the map. If you just play the map, it's like a normal Zone Wars, except when you die, you don't have to spectate until the next round. You get sent to the gulag where you can fight your way back into the round. But as you play, you can open these chests every single round, and there's a rare coin that you can get. There's actually 2 rare coins. This one right here, if you get it and post proof in my Discord, will enter you into a V-Bucks giveaway. And the second one is a little bit more rare, but if you get it and you post proof, you'll be entered into a PlayStation 5 giveaway. This is happening every single week on my map Rocket Wars, and I'm actually announcing the winners on stream every single week. So hop on the map by searching up Cypher PK and Fortnite Creative and go play Rocket Wars. Best of luck. At number 14, we have Shuri's Black Panther Claws. These were honestly pretty good. They were added in Chapter 5, Season 4, Marvel Season Part 2. They only did 35 damage per swing, but the pounce ability was really good for movement. And once you did enough damage, you could supercharge them and do even more damage and pounce even more frequently. You also moved faster and jumped higher when you had these equipped, and there were some crazy glitches you could do with this to reach max height or just be flying above the map the entire game. At number 13, we have Sub-Zero's Combat Kit. This is in the game right now, Chapter 6, Season 2. They do 40 damage for the first hit and then 35 damage for the rest of the combo. So not a lot of damage, and it doesn't swing extremely fast. And it doesn't have like the crazy effects that other melee weapons have where you're hard to hit. It's kind of easy to hit somebody when they're spamming this on you. But it can save you from fall damage, and it allows you to walk on water, which is just pretty cool. The dash ability it has is also pretty decent for movement as well as saving yourself from fall damage, so it does have some good use cases. And of course, if you kill somebody without taking any damage with this thing, you will hear this in game.
Flawless victory.
At number 12, we have the Chains of Hades. This is actually a very impressive melee weapon. There was 2 different use cases for this. The first one, obviously, you could just swing it against players. It did 55 damage on the first 2 attacks and then 80 damage for the final hit. So the damage was a lot higher. The secondary fire was actually more useful. You could pull players and items towards you. So there was some use to it, kind of using it like a grappler. And there was a glitch at one point where you could hit people through walls using this weapon by just swinging while being really close to the wall. The animation while you were swinging was super clunky, making it very hard for people to hit you while you were attacking them, which is why this is ranked number 12 on this list. At number 11, we have the chainsaw. It was actually low-key kind of broken. Chapter 5, Season 4, they added this for Fort Nightmares, and it was a simple slash attack that would do 75 damage per swing. So we're talking a good chunk of damage on every single swing. There was also a rush attack where you put the chainsaw on the ground and it would propel you forward. This was good for movement, but it was also good to attack players with. On top of that, this weapon shredded through structures and builds. So if you were low HP and somebody has the chainsaw, they could easily break into your box and finish you off. The only reason this weapon isn't ranked higher is the actual slash attack was pretty slow, but everything else about this weapon is pretty decent. At number 10, we have the Chapter 2 lightsabers. And yes, I am separating the Chapter 2 from the Chapter 4 lightsabers because they are actually different. The Chapter 4 ones had the Force abilities. These ones did not, but they were still pretty good. When these were added to the game, a lot of people were still very bad at Fortnite. So the ability to block bullets and kind of walk up to players while their building and aiming skills weren't that great made these extremely strong. You also would attack extremely fast, starting off with a 45 damage hit and then a couple of 25 hits and then finishing with a 150 damage combo. And of course, you can't forget you could block a lot of bullets using these lightsabers. The only issue is there were a ton of lightsabers on the map when they first got added, so almost every single person you ran into had one. At number 9, we have the Grappler Blade. This is one of my favorite melee movement items ever added. It got added in the beginning of Chapter 5, and yes, it is a melee weapon. Even though a lot of people just use this for mobility, the swing attack this thing had was insane. You would hit the first swing for 40 damage, and I'm not talking about the basic swing attack, which only did 40 damage. I'm talking about the attack you could do mid-air, which was like a spinning slash that hit players for 60 damage. And you could easily land this while flying towards players. On top of that, if you actually hit the person with 2 slashes in a row, the second slash would send them flying, and you could get people to fall to their death or just push them away from you. Of course, the main utility for this item was the movement. It was the best movement in game that season, and everybody was using it from casuals to pro players. At number 8, we have the Chapter 4 lightsabers. So everything that the Chapter 2 lightsabers had, except they also had force abilities. One of the force abilities allowed you to push players away from you, while the other one allowed you to pull them towards you. And if you had the red lightsaber, you could actually pick up a bunch of rocks on the ground, including other vehicles and things that are near you, and chunk them towards players. And yes, you could damage them even if they're in a full box, because some of the rocks will break the builds while the other ones will go through, damaging the player for 40 damage per rock hit. And you could easily one-shot people with this thing if you used it properly. The fact that they were just as good as the Chapter 2 lightsabers, and on top of that having the ability to use the force, makes them top 8 on this list. At number 7, we have the Typhoon Blade. These were really good, and they were just horrible to play against. Now, even though the damage was only 28, the attack speed was really fast, and the animation of this thing was also insane. It was almost impossible to hit somebody once they start going with this combo. But that's not all. The Grand Slam attack you could do while you were in the air, and the in-air Cyclone Slash that would knock players off of hills and cliffs and make them fall to their death were also very useful. While you had this equipped, you could also sprint faster and jump higher, making it really, really good for movement. It would also make your stamina deplete slower, allowing you to sprint further. Now we'll move on to number 6, the Kneecapper. Now, there might be some recency bias with this one because it's in the season right now, but I actually think this melee weapon is going to age extremely well, mainly because of its alternate attack. Now, the base melee attack is solid. It does a ton of damage, similar to the Typhoon Blade. The only issue is that the animation for it is a lot less clunky, meaning while you were swinging with the Kneecapper, it's easy to get shot and finished off. But the alternate attack is really where it shines. When you do the alternate attack, you do a lot of damage and you knock players back. And you can use this in the middle of build fights. You can use this on top of hills to make people fall to their death. You can even camp porta potties, which is what people are using to force people to land and then knock them to their death. On top of that, while you have this equipped, you actually sprint faster and your stamina depletes slower, giving you a speed boost and great mobility. And the best part is, while you have this equipped, if you do a super jump, which is sprint and then jump, you actually don't take any fall damage. So between this one and the Typhoon Blade, I actually like the Kneecapper a lot more. But it wasn't good enough to be in the top 5, because at number 5, we have the Nitro Fist. These things were absolutely broken, especially when they first came out. They did end up getting nerfed a few times, but even in their most nerfed state, they were still very good. You had a 3-punch combo doing 55, 55, and then 70 damage. You also had an uppercut, which would break structures around you and do 60 damage, knocking your opponent up in the air, and yes, they would take fall damage. There was also a mid-air punch ability, which everybody used for mobility, and that also did 70 damage as well. You had 4 charges of the punch and they would regen, and the mythic version of the Nitro Fist had 5 charges as well. These things also did a ton of structure damage, 180 structure damage, allowing you to jump into any wooden box easily. Like I said, they ended up getting nerfed, but they were still a must-have in Chapter 5 Season 3. At number 4, we have the Kinetic Blade. This one was so solid. One of the best mobility items on this list, and it actually inspired a lot of the other mobility items like the Ninja Turtle Mythic. Fortnite honestly went off with the kinetic weapons, except the boomerang. We're going to pretend that one didn't happen. But the Kinetic Blade did 35 damage per attack, but it also had a knockback effect, allowing you to push people off of builds and off of structures to their death. But most people didn't really use that attack. They used it mainly for the mobility. You had 3 charges and it would refresh after 10 seconds, meaning that by the time you used all 3 charges, you would have a 4th one ready. It also negated fall damage when you dashed, and it was definitely the best rotation that season and was heavily used during the FNCS. At number 3, we have ODM gear. This one might be confusing because it doesn't seem like a melee weapon, but it is. The main function was to grapple onto things and increase your momentum, making it very, very hard to actually get shot while you were flying through the air with these things. Once you attach to somebody or something, you could pull yourself towards them and do a slash attack that did 70 damage. It was a super fast attack, making it very hard for your enemy to hit you. And if you got in trouble after that, you could swing from object to object at very, very fast speeds. I'm honestly very impressed with how they implemented this item. It really does feel like ODM gear from Attack on Titan. If you watch the episodes, it functions and works almost the exact same way. It also did a ton of damage to structures, allowing you to jump into people's boxes and then finishing them off with the melee attack. This was easily one of the best designed items in the game, which is why it deserves top 3. At number 2, though, we have the Shockwave Hammer. This is a classic. It released in Chapter 4 Season 1, and it was an absolutely hilarious weapon to use. You could slam players doing 75 damage, sending all players and objects that are in that range flying in different directions. This thing would do a ton of structure damage, doing over 400 structure damage. The secondary attack allowed you to bounce up into the air, making it great for movement and rotation. And on top of that, it also did damage. The only downside with this weapon is once you actually use the main slam attack, you were stuck in that animation for about a second, making it very easy for your opponents to one pump you. But people figured out quickly that you can drop the shockwave hammer from your inventory after slamming and pick it back up and immediately break out of that animation. This was just a super iconic weapon, and I hope one day Epic brings it back. I know they briefly brought it back in Fortnite Reload, and anytime someone sees it in Fortnite Reload, they actually go crazy for it. But it wasn't enough to be number one, because number one on this list, you guys might have guessed it, is the Infinity Blade. This was one of our first ever melee weapons, one of our first mythics ever added to Fortnite. This thing absolutely shredded through people and through builds. It did 75 damage per hit. It also healed you for 1 HP per second and gave you siphon on eliminations. This absolutely ruined the Winter Royale tournament, and it turned you into a mini boss, gaining 400 health and shield once you had it equipped. It also had a leap attack that would destroy all structures in its path, including fully built metal structures. And while you were using this weapon, you could still build. That's right. Eventually they nerfed it and made it to where you can't build if you had this Infinity Blade. But when it was first released for the first month or so, you could actually build while using it, making it extremely OP and deserving of the number one spot. Let me know if you agree or disagree with this list, and let me know what my next ranking video should be about. Thank you guys so much for watching. Today we're going through every single season of Fortnite, and we need to decide what the best weapon from each season was. And we start with Chapter 1, Season 1, and this one is easy. It's the pump shotgun. Now listen, we're not going to count the Zapatron because that was added by accident for 30 minutes. The pump in Season 1, Chapter 1 is actually one of the best weapons of all time if you actually used it. Some people might say it's either this or the gold scar, but here's the thing about the pump in Season 1. It did 240 headshot damage, making it very easy to one pump people. On top of that, back in Season 1, there was a sniper pump glitch where the pump shotgun had no damage drop off. So you could actually one-shot people with the pump from 60 meters or 100 meters away. That, with the ability to double pump, made it one of the strongest weapons this game has ever seen. And for Season 2, my choice for the best weapon is actually the minigun, because when this first came out, it was extremely broken. It had no cooldown, so you could shoot infinitely, and the ammo cap was 999. So you could carry nearly 1,000 bullets and just shoot infinitely. It was also a lot more accurate. It had a lot of damage to builds. It shredded through just about everything. Once you started shooting it, if you had enough ammo, you just wouldn't stop until everybody in front of you was dead. For Chapter 1, Season 3, I'm gonna give it to the hunting rifle. This was added during the season and people immediately fell in love. It was one of the best snipers they ever added, and it was actually very easy to use, unlike today. The body shot damage was okay, doing 86 damage with the green and a 90 damage with the blue, but both of these hunting rifles would actually one-shot headshot you, so they both did over 200 headshot damage. And the best clip to really show off how powerful it was the Tfue clip in 50 versus 50, where he just took out an entire brigade of defaults with the hunting rifle. Chapter 1, Season 4, this one's easy. It's the drum gun. When the drum gun got added, it became the ultimate weapon. It was the best SMG, the best AR. It was really, really good. And this is before we even had the Mythic drum gun with Midas. It was even better than the Mythic drum gun, in my opinion. It had a super fast fire rate with really good damage. The reload wasn't too slow like the LMG was, and the spread wasn't bad either. So you could kind of use it from medium to almost long range. It also had 50 bullets, so you didn't really have to reload before killing a lot of people. And people would use this as an SMG or an AR substitute. Now, the big honorable mention for this season would have to be the Thanos Gauntlet, of course, transforming into Thanos and wiping the entire lobby. But that, we're not going to count that as an official weapon because it was only there for a limited time. Somehow, Epic made an even more powerful spray weapon in Chapter 1, Season 5. The best weapon from that season was the P90. So the P90 was actually the weapon that replaced all weapons. You could use it as an SMG, you could use it in the close range, you could use it as an assault rifle, and I remember Daquan carrying 4 of these to wipe out an entire lobby. It also had 50 bullets, and it had an even faster reload time compared to the drum gun, and it was also more accurate than the drum gun, allowing you to use it from even further range. Now for Chapter 1, Season 6, we gotta give the best weapon to the Deagle. It was actually added in season 3, but the thing is, when they added it back in season 6, it actually did 150 structure damage. This completely changed the way the weapon was actually used. Because it had no damage drop off, it could one-shot any wooden wall no matter where you shot it from. So people were using this to jump into people's boxes. On top of that, it did 150 headshot damage with no damage drop off as well. This was the ultimate weapon for the early W key players. And for chapter 1 season 7, this one is pretty obvious. We got to give it to the Infinity Blade, our first real mythic weapon that stayed throughout the entire season. And I mean, there's not really much to say about it other than the fact that it was one of the most broken weapons they added and completely ruined one